Welcome home, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are all staying safe and healthy in this crazy time right now. Today's video is going to be a what I eat in a day, but it is going to be a way different what I eat in a day than I have ever done on this channel. So I decided to do an extremely elaborate what I eat in a day video because right now everyone's kind of trying new recipes and baking bread and doing all these crazy things that they now have all this time to do. So I thought it'd be super fun to do a super elaborate what I eat in a day where I basically make complicated meals that take a long time to do. Basically just put on my Gordon Ramsay pants and decided to be a chef for the day. I will link all of the recipes that I used down below. There's some that I tweaked a little bit just because I either didn't have all of the ingredients or stuff, but literally everything that I made turned out amazing. It was a lot of work to do all of this. I definitely wouldn't do it again in one day. I would do like the individual recipes spread out, but not everything in one day because it was a lot of work. So I hope you guys enjoy this video because it was a lot of effort was put into it, but it was definitely worth it. So please enjoy this video and yeah. So I decided to try out that TikTok whipped coffee, Dalagna coffee, I don't know what it's called. But basically you use 2 tablespoons of instant coffee, 2 tablespoons sugar, and 2 tablespoons hot water. So it's super easy, and then you just whisk it together. I had a hand whisk, but if you use a regular whisk, it might just take a little bit longer. And then once it gets super frothy and basically like the texture or the consistency of whipped cream, that is when you know it is done. And then I just poured that into a glass with ice and plant milk. Let me just tell you, this was so strong. I would recommend this recipe between 2 people, or just like half this recipe if it's just you, because this was like way too strong for me. But it is really good because I've made it since this, not as strong, and it was really good. Okay, so I decided to make cinnamon rolls. So I heated up some butter and some milk in a bowl, and then I poured that in a large bowl, and I poured in 1 packet of active dry instant yeast or whatever on top, and I basically let that activate for 10 minutes. So after 10 minutes, I added in the rest of the ingredients. I will link all of the recipes down below, like I said. And I mixed that together, and then I just added in the flour and everything else. I added in the flour a little bit at a time until the dough was the consistency that the recipe recommended. And so I just had to keep adding it in like half a cup at a time. I think I might have ended up using the recommended amount of flour minus a half a cup. So I don't really remember. But once that was the consistency that I wanted it to be, I had to cover the flour and let that rise for an hour. So keep in mind, if you want cinnamon rolls right away in the morning, you're gonna have to let it rise. So while my cinnamon roll flour dough was rising, I decided to make my focaccia bread dough because the focaccia bread takes like 8 hours to rise, so I wanted it for dinner, so I needed to make the dough in the morning. So the dough was really easy to make. It was literally just like flour, salt, and then I added in the yeast, the oil, and the water, and I literally just stirred that up into a ball of dough, whatever, and I covered it and I let it rise for 9 hours next to the cinnamon roll dough. So once the cinnamon roll dough had risen for an hour, I took it out on a floured surface and I rolled it into as best of a triangular shape as I could. I think that I may have rolled it a little too thin, so I guess if maybe you recreate this, maybe don't roll it as thin as I did, but I guess it depends on how like doughy and thick you like your cinnamon rolls. So I basically just kept rolling it out into a rectangle. So once it was completely rolled out, I covered it all with melted butter, and then of course sugar and cinnamon. It's totally optional how much of these ingredients you feel like adding. And then I rolled it super, super tightly into a long cylinder shape. And once it was in that shape, I cut it really carefully into pieces and I put it in a baking tray. So I brushed the top of the cinnamon rolls with melted butter again, and then I covered that just while I let the oven preheat and while I made the icing. So the icing, I literally just used powdered sugar and some almond milk, and I just blended it up, and that was it. Once the cinnamon rolls were finished, I just let them cool down for a little bit, and then I drizzled on the icing, and I definitely did have 3 of these. They were amazing and so good. I'll definitely be making these again. For lunch, I decided to make some vegan poboys, so I made the meat part out of oyster mushrooms, and this recipe I winged a lot. So I made the kind of batter with like almond milk, apple cider vinegar, and spices, and I basically just let the mushrooms marinate in that in the fridge for like 15 minutes while I made the breadcrumb stuff. So I used flour, panko breadcrumbs, nutritional yeast, and a lot more seasoning. And then I just battered them and I fried them in a pan. I didn't really deep fry them. I didn't have a deep fryer, but they still turned out pretty good. And I will link the recipe that I kind of used down below, but like I said, I really just winged this. So I just put some spicy bitchin sauce on, some lettuce, tomato, and pickles, which are very, very vital for this recipe. And then I loaded on the oyster mushrooms, and I had 2 of these. They were phenomenal. Highly recommend my new favorite sandwich. So I decided to make tiramisu, which I had to prep prior to when I was actually gonna eat it. And I had a really hard time finding like a good vegan tiramisu recipe. But basically, I just kind of made more of a tiramisu cake, so I will link the recipe that I did use down below. But I made 2 cakes, and then I used a ton of Kahlua and made coconut Kahlua whipped cream with coconut cream and sugar and Kahlua. And then I also had to make cashew cream with Kahlua. So I blended up the cashew cream, then I mixed some of that together, and then I soaked the cake in coffee and Kahlua. There's a lot of Kahlua in this recipe, by the way. So I soaked the cakes in cold coffee with Kahlua, and then I basically layered that with the cream and the other layer of the cake, and then more of the cream, and then the actual coconut whipped cream on top. And then I also put on some cacao powder, which I didn't do very well. And I let that set in the fridge because you need it to be kind of firm. For dinner, I made truffle ricotta mushroom ravioli. So I kind of winged this, but I'll link the recipe for the almond vegan ricotta down below. So I basically blended that all up, cooked the mushrooms, and then I made the dough, which I used half regular flour, half semolina flour. And once I mixed all of that up with the water and got it into like dough consistency, I let that refrigerate for like 10 minutes, I think. And then in the meantime, I cooked my focaccia bread because the dough was finally risen. So I added in some fresh rosemary and I let that cook for like 40 minutes. Then I blended in the ricotta with the cooked mushrooms. So that made kind of like this pate filling. So I blended that together, and then I rolled out the dough for the pasta, and I cut them into little round shapes, and I filled them, and I squeezed the little ends together with some water, and that was how I made the ravioli. It took a really, really long time, and I didn't make that many of them, but they turned out so good. I didn't get any footage of when they were actually cooked afterwards. I don't know why. Okay, so that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. It took me a long time to make everything. I was so exhausted, covered in flour by the end of this video, but let me know if you want to see more maybe like cooking related videos. I probably am not going to do another what I eat in a day that's this intense, but I'm definitely happy to try out new recipes because I really enjoyed cooking everything. It was just a lot of work and stressful to do it all in one day, like I said, but yeah, it was super fun. So let me know if you want more kind of like cooking related videos or recipe videos or things like that, and let me know which of the recipes that I made you would want to try the most, because I'm curious. My personal favorite was, oh my god, it's so hard to actually choose now that I think about it. Probably the tiramisu was probably my favorite because it turned out so good. I love tiramisu, so now that I know how to make it, I'm just like so excited. I want to make it all the time. Love the tiramisu, but out of all the savory things, probably the ravioli. It was amazing. Or the poboys, they were so good too. I don't know, it's so hard to choose. They were all so good. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.